colonel laughed at a little black girl's request to use the shooting range until she broke every SEAL shooting record. Laughter ricocheted through Fort Braxton's officers' club like cannon fire, sending crystal goblets trembling atop polished mahogany tables. "You can't be serious, kid." Colonel Marcus Steele leaned forward in his deep leather chair, blue eyes gleaming with unkind humor as he eyed the 12-year-old girl standing alone across from his desk, flanked by senior military brass. Maya Johnson held herself in the rigid posture her father had drilled into her, small fists curled at her sides, gripping a weathered envelope. Her father's Medal of Honor, awarded to Sergeant David Johnson, rested against her narrow chest, an aching reminder of the sacrifice that had led her to this moment of public shame, confronted by men who treated her presence as an uninvited nuisance. "Sir, I would like to request permission to use the firing range today," Maya said again, voice steady though her fingers quivered ever so slightly. "It's the 3rd anniversary of my father's death in combat, and I wanted to honor him by practicing shooting as he taught me before he left for his last mission." Steele roared louder, pounding the table with such force that whiskey sloshed in nearby glasses. "Did you hear that? She thinks she can shoot. What's next? Flying our fighter jets?" The men around him chuckled wickedly, whispering insults they didn't bother to conceal. "Girls should be home playing house," muttered Major Thompson. "Not running around with weapons," added Captain Williams, prompting another round of mean-spirited laughter. What none of them realized, and what Maya guarded with sacred secrecy, was that David Johnson hadn't just been a soldier for 6 years. Day after school, and on every weekend, Maya had trained with him in secret, mentored by a man known among elite soldiers for unmatched marksmanship, a legend whispered through barracks but never made official. 3 years ago, while grief still stung like shrapnel in her chest, she made a silent vow over the flag-draped grave that no one else heard, but one she carried like fire in her soul, fueling each covert session she'd endured since that day. "Listen here, girl," Steele said, rising with calculated menace and pacing deliberately, his towering frame casting a looming shadow. "This base isn't some cartoon fantasy. Guns aren't playthings, and our range is no place for childish games. Go home, turn on your TV, and leave this to real soldiers." Maya's cheeks burned with shame, searing like molten metal. But she inhaled deeply, awakening something familiar within her, something colder than fury, something controlled. The very discipline her father had instilled when she was underestimated, mocked, or ignored. "With all due respect, sir," she said, her voice oddly calm, enough to cause a brief pause in the ridicule. "I have all the necessary documentation, proper supervision approved by the Military Family Affairs Department, and the security requirements have been met. My request is within base regulations." Major Peterson, seated beside Steele, choked mid-sip. "She knows the rules. How adorable." More laughter rippled across the room, but this time a few men shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Then Maya's gaze collided with Steele's for the first time, an unwavering, steely look that made his smirk twitch just slightly. That gaze held something deeper, an unshakable force contained in a child's frame. The kind of gaze worn by battle-hardened soldiers who've survived the worst and kept going. Steele exhaled with theatrical irritation. "Persistent brat. Fine, since you won't let it go, let's settle it right here. Hit 3 out of 10 targets at 50 meters, and I'll sign your pass myself. But if you fail, you'll walk away and never disturb grown men with this nonsense again." A spark ignited in Maya's chest, but she gave no sign of it. "I accept your proposal, sir." Amid sneers and ridicule, she stood like a statue guarding a truth too powerful to reveal before its time. These men had no clue Maya wasn't here for a memory. She had come to fulfill a vow that would turn this degrading encounter into the most unforgettable triumph that base had ever seen. If this story of courage and determination is touching your heart, get ready to discover how a simple 12-year-old little girl was about to rewrite the record books and humiliate some of the most arrogant military men the U.S. Army has ever produced. Steele's predatory smile widened like a shark. That smells blood in the water. Perfect. Let everyone witness this lesson in knowing your place. He gestured theatrically to the other officers. Gentlemen, let's head to the firing range and watch a child learn about reality. Major Thompson stood up, rubbing his hands together with cruel anticipation. This is going to be better than a movie. The little girl will run out crying before she can even hold the gun. Right. The other officers laughed like hyenas, already imagining the public humiliation that was to come. As they walked through the corridors of the base, Maya kept a few steps behind the group, listening to every poisonous comment they made without bothering to lower her voice. "I bet she faint at the first shot," whispered Captain Williams, "or she start crying for her mommy." What none of them knew was that Maya had been to that same firing range hundreds of times. For 3 years since her father's death, she had secretly come every Saturday morning at 5:30 a.m. when the base was still asleep. The maintenance soldier, a war veteran who had served with David Johnson, would quietly open the gate for her, an unspoken agreement between people who understood the true meaning of honoring the dead. Arriving at the firing range, Steele pointed to a table where several standard-issue weapons lay. "Pick your tool of humiliation. Little girl, I recommend the lightest one. Maybe you'll at least be able to hold it without dropping it." Maya walked to the table with the same calm she had shown in the officers' club. Her fingers ran over the available weapons before settling on a Glock 19 pistol, the exact same model her father had used to teach her the basics of shooting when she was only 7 years old. "Interesting choice," Steele commented with feigned interest. "At least you have good taste in failing with style." The sneering remark triggered another wave of mocking laughter among the officers, but several soldiers on the sidelines didn't share the same amusement. Sergeant Rodriguez, head of the base's firearms training program, stepped forward with a hesitant frown. Having once served under the renowned David Johnson, he understood the legacy that name carried. "Colonel, perhaps an additional layer of oversight would be appropriate in this situation," he suggested cautiously. "Absolutely not," Steele barked, cutting him off with sharp finality. "She wants to pretend she's a soldier? Let her learn the hard way, no shortcuts, no soft landings." The harshness in his voice unsettled even some loyal staff members. Maya performed her weapon inspection with a grace and precision that stunned Rodriguez momentarily. She released the magazine, verified the chamber, and checked the firing mechanism, all done with clockwork expertise that suggested years of disciplined repetition. "Well, well," Steele chuckled, visibly intrigued. "Looks like Daddy showed you a few moves before he exited the picture." He leaned closer, letting the cruel jab at her father's passing land like a blow. Maya's heart pounded, but her face remained unreadable. Then, she did something no one expected. She shut her eyes, holding them closed for a moment that seemed to stretch unnaturally long. When she opened them again, something in her demeanor had shifted entirely. Gone was the timid girl. What stood in her place radiated calm lethality. "Ready when you are," she said evenly, her voice carrying a weight far beyond her years. Several older soldiers exchanged knowing glances. This wasn't bravado. It was the same tonal gravity they had heard before during real combat orders. Steele stood behind her, arms folded smugly, while his cronies whispered wagers on her inevitable failure. "All right, sweetheart. 10 rounds, 50 meters. You hit just 3, and I'll honor our little deal. Should be easy if you inherited all that genius from your dear old dad." What these smug officers failed to understand was that David Johnson's skill wasn't just impressive, it was legendary. He'd been the silent teacher behind the base's deadliest sharpshooters, the go-to mentor for those needing top-tier shooting expertise, and Maya? She'd become his most dedicated student. She had amassed a staggering 4,847 hours of focused training in just 3 years. Every free moment, every early morning, every missed birthday party was invested in mastering her father's art. As she stepped into position, a hush fell over the space. Even the wind seemed to pause, as if anticipating something monumental. The sneers behind her turned to low murmurs. Steele shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension but unable to pinpoint its source. What those mocking men didn't grasp was that each insult hurled at her only stoked an inner fire that grew sharper and colder. With each word of doubt, Maya's resolve hardened like forged steel. She wasn't just reacting, she was transforming. Her stance alone was enough to jolt. Rodriguez. Feet perfectly aligned, shoulders squared, breath metered with military precision, it was as if David Johnson himself had materialized through her. "What's the holdup, girl?" Steele taunted, his voice slicing through the silence. "Need help pulling the trigger? Or aiming, maybe?" More laughter followed, ugly, dismissive, premature. Maya inhaled deeply and shut her eyes for 3 seconds. In that brief silence, her father's voice echoed in her soul. "Steady, princess. Feel the wind. Count the heartbeats. The perfect shot lives in stillness." When her eyes opened, even passers-by were drawn by the force of her focus. Something unseen but unmistakable radiated from her discipline, presence, purpose. "Standing by for your signal?" she said softly, her tone so centered and icy that Steele hesitated briefly, caught off guard. Rodriguez, moving quietly, took up a position where he could respond quickly if needed. He had served alongside David Johnson during the most harrowing mission of his career, and he recognized the weight of what was about to unfold. "Colonel," he said with quiet authority, "perhaps it's worth ensuring everyone here has adequate ear protection." "Just in case." Steele rolled his eyes. "Sergeant, she's just a kid. It's 10 bullets. We don't need a military exercise to watch a child stumble." Rodriguez said nothing more, but stayed alert. He knew better than anyone that David Johnson wasn't simply a good shooter, he had been the foundation of elite sniper training on that base. "Okay, young lady," Steele announced, sarcasm curling every word. 60 seconds. 10 rounds. Clock starts now. Maya's first shot rang out like a strike of lightning on dry earth. The second followed so precisely that seasoned veterans instinctively straightened. Her tempo was unmistakable, controlled, rehearsed, deadly. Rodriguez, watching through his scope, let out a reverent breath. "Unbelievable," he murmured. "She's more refined than David ever was." Steele chuckled again, though the sound had grown thinner. When the third round struck with laser precision, his smile faltered. The mocking mask began to crack. "Fast shooter," Thompson noted, attempting to keep things light. "Maybe she's in a hurry to get it over with." But the truth was far more profound. Maya had internalized every breath, every stance, every rhythm passed down by her father. For 1,095 consecutive days, she had woken up at 5 a.m. to practice at a makeshift range behind her house using paper targets taped to trees. What no one had any clue about were the 847 hours Maya had invested in developing her mental discipline. Her mind had been shaped with advanced focus strategies, giving her the ability to eliminate distractions completely and achieve a meditative concentration that often took seasoned soldiers years of combat experience to develop. Shots 4, 5, and 6 rang out with a flawless cadence, so consistently placed that murmurs of disbelief began spreading through the crowd. Officers who had once laughed now traded uneasy looks, their smirks slowly fading. "Why is it taking forever to confirm the hits?" Captain Williams muttered, the confidence in his voice starting to falter. Rodriguez already knew the answer. A few veterans in the audience had recognized that distinct, sharp metallic ping one that only resonated when a bullet pierced the absolute center of a steel target. Maya's breathing remained slow and deliberate as she fired. There was no haste, no tension. Just the calm, calculated delivery of a technique that had been patiently and rigorously perfected. Her seventh shot caused Steele's mocking laughter to stop abruptly. The eighth silenced the quiet chatter around him. The ninth ushered in a stillness so complete that it felt like the entire range had frozen in time. Then came the 10th moment. Maya made a subtle shift in her stance, adjusting her grip in response to a barely noticeable gust of wind one no one else had even detected. It was the kind of minute unconscious adaptation that only the most elite shooters perform without thought. When that final round echoed across the range, it did more than signal the end of a challenge. It marked the birth of something undeniable. Maya gently lowered her firearm, activated the safety, and turned to face Colonel Steele with calm authority. 10 shots complete as requested, sir," she declared in a voice that reflected training, poise, and unwavering intent. For the first time since arriving, Steele's smug demeanor faltered. The cool, composed air around Maya stood in stark contrast to the humiliation he had expected her to endure. Rodriguez stepped forward, binoculars in hand, prepared to validate the truth that everyone present now feared to speak aloud. He had witnessed elite shooters hit impressive marks across his long career, but what he had just seen hinted at something that exceeded even his highest expectations. Those arrogant men had believed they were enforcing a lesson. But Maya had arrived not to survive their ridicule. She had come to demonstrate that greatness often blossoms in the very places others disregard. That strength isn't always loud, but it always rises. Rodriguez focused his binoculars on the distant target. His face went pale, a look of stunned disbelief washing over his features. Even Steele involuntarily stepped back as a strange chill prickled down his spine, realizing that the man beside him had just witnessed something extraordinary. The wind rustling through the base's flags was now the only sound, underscoring the depth of silence left in the wake of Maya's performance. Rodriguez stared at the target with wide, reverent eyes. His expression moved from disbelief to awe, as if peering at a work of perfection too pure to explain. "Sergeant Rodriguez?" Steele asked, his tone strained, laced with unease as he tried to sound casual. "Well, what's the verdict?" He attempted a chuckle, but the tension in his voice betrayed him. "Time to prepare our reality check for the girl, I suppose." The sergeant lowered the binoculars slowly, visibly shaken, and turned to Maya with an expression of deep respect and something bordering fear. "Colonel," he began, his voice hoarse as if the words resisted being spoken. I think you should take a look for yourself." Steele's confidence cracked. "What do you mean, take a look? How many hits? 5, 6? His voice trembled slightly, coated in the panic of someone realizing their control slipping away. Rodriguez extended the binoculars with shaking hands. "Sir, all 10. I mean, you really need to see this with your own eyes." Steele snatched the device from him, his hands betraying a sudden tremor. As he focused on the target, his eyes widened. His jaw slackened. The smirk he wore moments ago dissolved. What he saw didn't just challenge his expectations, it demolished them. 10 rounds, every single one embedded in the exact same central location. The grouping was so tight, it looked like a single bullet hole only slightly expanded by repetition. It was the kind of result snipers spend entire careers trying to achieve. And it had just been delivered by a girl barely old enough to start high school. "This can't be real," Steele muttered, checking again and again as if repetition would change the truth. "Some sort of equipment failure or trick, something's off." Maya stood calmly, saying nothing, letting his disbelief do the talking. Her expression wasn't boastful. There was no smirk, no gloating. Only the quiet confidence of someone who had carried a mission in her heart for years and finally executed it flawlessly. Major Thompson, unable to contain himself, grabbed the binoculars from Steele's hands and took a look. He recoiled, his mouth falling open. "That grouping. That's cleaner than anything I've seen in my entire military service." One by one, each officer checked. One by one, their skepticism collapsed under the weight of proof. Captain Williams, once the loudest doubter, now stood motionless, speechless, all the bravado gone. And then Rodriguez, compelled by what he'd witnessed, approached Maya with solemn admiration. His voice rose with clear reverence for all to hear. "Miss Johnson, your father would be bursting with pride. This isn't just a tribute. It sets a new standard for excellence on this base." His words struck Steele harder than any bullet. For the first time, he grasped the magnitude of his mistake, publicly belittling the daughter of a decorated war hero, a child whose skill eclipsed that of any soldier under his command. Worse, it had all unfolded in front of dozens of witnesses. Soldiers already whispering, some filming discreetly. The legend would spread quickly of the colonel who tried to disgrace a girl and instead was humbled by her brilliance. "How?" Steele finally asked, voice distant and broken. "How can a child shoot like that?" Maya turned toward him, her expression calm, clear, and firm. "My father taught me that respect is earned through actions, not words. He taught me that when someone doubts you based solely on prejudice, the best response is to demonstrate exactly what you are capable of." The sheer power in those words struck the gathering like a lightning strike, raw, direct, and impossible to ignore. Here stood a 12-year-old girl delivering a masterclass in grace, discipline, and unmatched skill to the very authority figures meant to inspire her. Sergeant Rodriguez stepped forward slowly. "Miss Johnson," he said gently, "your father always spoke of your gifts, but he never gave details. He never explained this." He paused, visibly humbled, then added, "Would you be open to trying from a longer distance?" Maya's eyes lit up with sincere excitement. "What distance are we talking, Sergeant?" 100 meters, 200, whatever you're comfortable with." Steele, watching this exchange unfold, felt a rising panic. The girl he had intended to embarrass had just begun to unravel everything he stood for. More personnel had gathered, drawn by the quiet storm of whispers racing across Fort Braxton. Veterans now approached with solemn nods, having seen something extraordinary in the making. Maya rechecked her firearm, her movements swift and practiced. One an unintentional rebuke to the officers who had so thoroughly misjudged her. "Sergeant Rodriguez, 200 meters sounds perfect," she said firmly. It was in that instant Steele confronted a bitter truth. Maya hadn't come merely to participate. She was here to give a powerful, unforgettable lesson in dignity, precision, and earned respect, and she was just getting started. As the targets were repositioned to distances that tested even the most seasoned marksman, a question buzzed silently through the crowd. Would Maya continue to shatter expectations? Or would she finally reach the edge of her miraculous abilities? And beyond that, what more could this child, armed only with talent and conviction, teach a crowd of adults about strength, humanity, and humility? Half a year later, Maya Johnson strolled through the same military base, a golden badge swaying proudly around her neck. It read, Junior Precision Marksmanship Instructor, Army Exceptional Talent Program. At just 13, she had earned the distinction of being the youngest person ever officially recognized for such a title in U.S. military history. That legendary morning had escalated into a breathtaking display. After acing the 200-meter round, Maya pressed onward 300, 400, then 500 meters. At the final distance, she struck a coin-sized target using only iron sights. Hardened war veterans wept. A soldier-recorded video of the event, uploaded discreetly, exploded across the internet. Little Girl Destroys Racist Colonel with Impossible Shot reached 47 million views within 2 weeks. Maya's triumph became a beacon of hope around the world. For Colonel Steele, however, the aftermath was devastating. A military probe exposed a long history of discriminatory actions under his command. Dozens of military families surfaced, each recounting similar stories of ridicule and prejudice. Viral images of Steele mocking Maya spread like wildfire, often captioned, "The man who tried to shame a legend." He was formally demoted and reassigned to a remote post in Alaska, relegated to basic clerical tasks. His once decorated retirement became a quiet, humiliating departure. Worse still, he now reported to commanders from the very communities he once looked down upon. As for Major Thompson and Captain Williams, both were formally reprimanded and required to complete extensive training in equity and inclusion. Neither officer ever regained full stature in their careers, forever marked by their role in that disgraceful episode. Maya, on the other hand, soared. The Pentagon launched a custom-tailored education and training initiative, enabling her to pursue advanced tactical education while continuing her academic studies. Prestigious universities competed to secure her future enrollment. Military tech companies sought partnerships for her development. But most meaningful were the letter's countless messages from children across the world. Many were from underrepresented communities, each thanking Maya for showing them that limitations were often illusions. Black girls especially embraced her story as a declaration that brilliance knows no boundaries. Rodriguez, now a staff sergeant, was officially named her mentor. Watching her coach fresh recruits one afternoon, he told her, "Your father would be bursting with pride, Maya, but I think he'd be even prouder of the person you're becoming." The very shooting range where her journey began was renamed the David Johnson Precision Range in honor of her father. A bronze plaque installed near the entry recounted that day's events, a lasting tribute to the idea that excellence often emerges from where it's least expected. Maya still visited her father's grave every Saturday, but the tears were gone. In their place, stories, updates on her achievements, milestones, and the biases she continued to dismantle one perfect shot at a time. "I did it, Dad," she always whispered with a quiet smile. "I showed them what we're capable of." The culture of the base was forever changed. A strict zero-tolerance stance on discrimination was enacted. Outreach programs to discover hidden talents in marginalized communities became a top priority. Maya's legacy became mandatory reading and officer leadership seminars, a cautionary tale on the perils of prejudice and the unseen power of potential. Most ironic of all, Steele, once intent on humiliating Maya, had inadvertently given her the grand stage to prove her worth. His plan backfired spectacularly, becoming the foundation of the base's greatest transformation. In an interview broadcast 6 months later, Maya was asked if she harbored resentment toward Colonel Steele. Her response captivated the nation. "He gave me the most powerful gift of all, the chance to prove he was wrong about me." Sometimes, our biggest critics end up becoming our most valuable teachers, even if they don't intend to be. From that moment forward, Maya Johnson stood as a living testament to a profound truth. The greatest revenge isn't vengeance, it's undeniable success. She had turned insult into drive, injustice into strength, and underestimation into unshakable determination. The shy young girl who once asked permission to honor her father became a force that shattered expectations. rewrote military history, and redefined what it meant to be underestimated. If this story of determination and justice touched your heart, subscribe to the channel to discover more inspiring stories of people who turned their greatest humiliations into the most epic victories of their lives.